We are on 8B around the middle. I think that's where she left off yesterday. Start from the second last narrow line, Tanarabana. Tanarabana, Rabbi's taught. He's Kachli Bimana. Man wants to marry a woman with this amount of money. Tanaim La'aba Lavicha. So she says, give it to my father or to your father. Presumably to accept it on her behalf, um, or perhaps like she's kind of delegating her. She say like you can buy it, you can acquire me from my father rather than from myself. So Einam Kadeshas, that doesn't work because um, we interpret that as a rejection. It's like, you think you think I'm going to marry you for this $100, you might as well try and marry me and marry my father. Um, so Almanashi Kablamli, but if she says that uh, I want uh, I want my father or your father to accept that money on my behalf, Mikudeshes, that works. So first Gemara wants to know Tana Abba like why are we specifying her father, right? Um, you could this would apply to anybody, right? If the woman says I want you, you can give the money to President Biden, right, on my behalf. So it would be the same thing. If it's if it's phrased in a way that implies a rejection, it's a rejection. So if it's phrased in a way that implies he'll accept the money on my behalf, then it works. So why specify her father in the Bryce's formulation? So it says like to tell you that even if it's her father, in the first part of the brisa where we say it's a rejection, it's still a rejection. And and the and your father is like that implies that like even if it's your father, your close family member who's accepting it on my behalf, it still works. Anyway, he's kachili b'mana. The brisa continues. If a man says, "Here's money to I want to marry you with this money," it's name Laploni, and she says, "Give it to John Doe to somebody to so and so." And because that doesn't work, but if she says that he will accept it on my behalf, Mikudashas, then it works. Now, this appears to be exactly the same thing as the first part of the Brisa, Abba Lavich, to my father, your father. It's exactly the same language that the Brisa uses when it talks about a third party. So we have to say both in the Brisa. If it only mentions your father, my father as the third party, maybe that only in the case of a family member would we understand that if she says that they should accept it on my behalf, that it works. But a man from the street, some other third party, maybe not. Why? The Samcha data Elihu. Maybe we assume that yes, family members are somebody that you trust, right? So Savra Avdin Shluchai, um, she's like comfortable making them her agents. Ploni, but just a random third party, low, maybe not. So that's why the Brisa says even if it's a third party, a random third party, it's still if she says give it to that third party to accept on my behalf, that still works. So why did it even bother specifying the case of the fathers? So maybe we would think that that it would, if we only specified that case, we would think that only the only people she would trust were people that we can assume she would trust, somebody from the family, but a third party maybe not. The mikarva data lagabayu, and you have to nihalayu. Like maybe with the fathers, she's like, yes, I'll give it to them as a gift, right? I'm really accepting it. Um, if she says, give it to my father or your father, I would think that she really is accepting it, right? If it's a third party, a random third party, and she says, yeah, give it to so and so, then that's sarcastic, right? That's a way of saying that I don't accept your offer of marriage. But if it's to one of the parents, then we might say, yeah, she's serious. She's accepting the Kiddushin, accepting the marriage, and the money she's giving as a gift to a family member. Okay, Tanar Rabban, another brisa. He's casually a man wants to marry a woman with money. His name Al Gavisel. Put them on that rock over there. Ain't Mikudeshes. That doesn't work. Vimhaya Salashala, but if it's her rock, if it's her property, Mikudeshes, then her property acquires the money by a Kenyan because he puts it in her property. By Rav Bibi, Rav Bibi asks, Salah shall Shneim. What if it's a joint? What if the rock is owned by both of them? So you have a parcel of land that's owned by two partners, a man and a woman, and he wants to marry her, and she says, "Put the money on that rock that we jointly own." So what about that? Take it. Don't know the answer to that one because it's unclear if it's really entering her possession or not, because it's still in his possession as well. Now he's kachuli bekikar. If a man tries to marry a woman with a loaf of bread, snail kelef, give it to that dog. She says, "Ain't mekudeshes." That's clearly a rejection. But if it's her dog, mekudeshes, then she's saying, "Yeah, give it to my dog to eat. She's going to benefit from it because it's feeding the dog." Then it works. By Rav Mari, Rav Mari asks, "Kalav ratzach." Let's say it's not her dog, but it's a dog that's running after her, it's chasing her, right? She's afraid it's gonna attack her. So then, what's the story? So maybe she's saying, yeah, sure, I'll marry you. Give that loaf of bread to the dog, so it'll stop chasing me. Or no, she's saying like that's not a benefit for me. You saw a dog chasing me. You have a responsibility to save me from this wild dog, right? The fact that I told you to throw the bread to the dog doesn't mean I accept your offer that I'm benefiting from the bread. You're benefiting from the bread because you're fulfilling your obligation to help me. Teku. So Gemara again doesn't resolve that question. He's actually bekikar. If the case of a loaf of bread, snail ani, give it to charity, give it to that poor person. Animal Kadashis, that doesn't work. I feel on the Allah, even if it's a poor person that she is in the habit of supporting, so now he's going to feed the guy for the day. So it's kind of a benefit to her because she doesn't have to feed him that day. It doesn't work. My time, why not? Amalei, because she can say, on the ban, like, why is this my responsibility? Sure, I feed this guy every day, but that doesn't make him my ward. It doesn't make me responsible to feed him tomorrow any more than you're responsible to feed him tomorrow. Um, so, um, so, so feeding this poor person doesn't benefit the woman, even though she's in the habit of doing it herself. However, the Havia Kamazmin, Omre Petachiasa. There was this guy who made his living by selling. It's unclear if this is two items or one item, but some kind of beads, right, or buttons. Asaya, he eats, and so this woman comes by. Amalei, she says, "Havli chad socha, give me a string of these, give me a necklace made of this stuff." Amalei, he said to her, "Yahivnele lech mikadashli, I'll give you one. I'll give you this necklace, and will you accept that as a marriage proposal?" Amalei, she said, "Havamiava, yeah, go ahead and give it." Right, and note that she's using this double formulation of the word "give it." Give it over. Amrav Chama. So Rav Chama says, "Kol hava mi'avav." She uses that kind of expression. Love klumhu. That doesn't mean anything. She's like, just give it to me. It's not like saying, yes, I'm going to accept this as a marriage proposal. She's like, don't be ridiculous. Just give it to me. Now we'll have a couple of similar cases. How governed to have a kashase chamra b'chan. So there was a guy who was drinking wine in a bar. Asai hahi itza, and this woman comes by. Amalei, she said, "Havli chakasa, give me a glass of wine." Amalei said to her, If I give it to you, will you accept that as a marriage proposal?" Amalei, she said, "Ashkuya yashkan, like just go ahead and pour me some." Right. So the same thing with this double formulation. Rav Chama says, love that doesn't mean anything. She's just saying, yeah, like just give it to me, right, in a sarcastic way. And a third such case, how Gavra Kashadi Tamre Midikla, there was a guy who was picking dates from a tree. I'll say he eats Amalei, and this woman came by. Shdei Tarte, throw me a couple of dates. Amalei said, if I throw you 2 dates, will you marry me with them? Amalei Shadim should just throw them. So same thing. Love Klum. He uses that double lingo, then that doesn't mean anything. So they asked, Hav Ashke Ushadema. What if she doesn't use the double formulation? She just says, yes, give it to me, or not the word yes, but give it to me, or let me drink, or throw me a date. Ravina says Mikudeshus. Yeah, in that case, it works. In that case, it's a valid marriage. But Rav Sama Bar Rakta Amar Taga de Malka Enam Kudefis. He's swearing an oath, like by the crown of the queen. Um, it doesn't work. And in practice, even if she doesn't use this formulation, this double formulation, it's still not considered a valid acceptance of of a marriage proposal. And going back to some earlier things that we said, silk doesn't need to be appraised before being used for Kiddushin. We assume that the value is there. The Rabbi Elazar. And the law follows Rabbi Elazar, who says that if he only gives a down payment on what she on what he promised, right? If he only gives her 10% of, he says, "I'm going to give you $100 to marry me," and he only gives her 10, that we consider it a deposit, and it's valid. The Hilchas Rav Nachman, and also the law follows Rava, who says that if he promises her cash and he just gives her collateral, in the meantime, that still counts as a valid marriage. Sorry. No. He says that that is not. That if he promised her cash and he gives her collateral instead, that does not affect the marriage. He has to give her what he promised her. Okay. Now we're going to leave we've exhausted all the discussion about Kiddushin with money, and we're now turning to a contract. Shtar Ketzad, how does it work? Kosovo law on the if the man writes on paper or on a tablet of some kind, that I'm marrying you with this document. This is an agreement that we're married. Alpha Pishem Bashan, even though the paper isn't worth any money, any significant amount of money, then it works. Or if a man says to a father of a minor, of a girl that he writes in a contract, your daughter is married to me, or bichama restlessly, or she's engaged to me, bichalili into, or your daughter is going to be my wife. These all work. Maskiflar of Zera Bar Mamos, or of Zera asks, Holodami Hashtar Lashtar's Vine. Wait, this is not a valid contract, right? In a regular contract, there's a price for something. We write a contract and like, you're giving me $100 and I'm selling you this object, right? It's a two-way transaction. There, we're talking about a sale, right? So here it's the opposite. The husband writes, I'm acquiring your daughter, as it were. Acquiring, maybe not the right word, but you get the idea. Like I'm getting your daughter as a wife. And like the father doesn't have any part in it, or the woman doesn't have any part in it, right? So like what makes this a valid agreement? Rava answers Hasam Yana Dekra. These are both kind of derived from a pasuk. Hasam, like both of these types of marriage mechanisms. Hasam ksiv umachar me'achuzaso. When it talks about selling a field in the Torah, so it says and he sells from his the seller sells from his inheritance. Okay, but mocher tel rachmana. There, it's the Torah indicates that it is the seller who has to write the contract, right? Affecting the transfer of his property. Hachab, in the case of the marriage, Ksiv ki yikach ishisha, when a man takes a wife. So again, it makes the man the active party. So Baval Tal Rachmana. So the Torah is saying that the man is the one who can affect the marriage with the Torah. This is very strange, right? I mean, we're gonna continue to go through this until we get an understanding of what part the woman plays here. But right now it seems like the Gemara is assuming that I can just go and marry a woman without her consent by writing it down. Um, so the Gemara says Hasam Namik Siv, but also in the case of selling, it also says Sados Bakesef Yiknu. And this is in Yirmiyahu, I think, where it's written, people will buy fields for money, right? So there, it's the it also refers to the buyer. So does that mean that in the case of selling property, that the buyer can write the oh, sorry, the buyer can write the contract without the seller signing off on it? That makes that appears, if you're going to go by the way that things like that are phrased in the Torah, so you could do that with selling also. So where it says, well, yaknu, you don't have to read it that way. You could, because of the way that you could punctuate or vowelize the word, you could make it seem like it is the seller who is writing it, and you could read it Sados Bakesef Yaknu. They should the people can hand over their fields. They can give over their fields, right? So then the active person is the seller. So then you could say, the Gemara says, well, you could say the same thing about marriage. My tamakars yaknu mishum dichsivu machar. Like, why do you want to do it that way? Because you want it to come out that it's the seller who affects the transaction, which makes sense, right? And that aligns with the first verse we brought, which is the seller sells his field, right? Hachanami karibei ki yikach. Here you could also say. You could say ki yakach. You could vowelize it so that it refers to the woman, not the man, right? Dichsiv as biti nasati lisha, because there's another verse that indicates clearly that it is the father of the bride who is the active party. As biti nasati lisha. When this is in a different paragraph, but in the passage in Torah about a dispute over whether a woman was a virgin when she got married. But the point is that it's this sentence is phrased as the father is the active voice on behalf of the woman. So you could make the other verse come out that way also. So this is clearly not a productive way to resolve this thing. We'll take a different approach. Now we know the rule. We know the answer. These are just the rules that are halacha Moshe Sinai, that are just a tradition. And the psukim are just you can't parse the verses to try and make it come out one way or the other, because those are just kind of memory aids, right? Or something like that. Those are not the way it's written is not the determining factor. As we said, let's say the rule is the rule, and these verses are just supports. Or you could say Hasam Namik Siv if you want to go with the way the psukim are written. So in going back to the verse in Yirmiyahu, it says, and I took the bill of sale, which indicates again that it's the seller who writes the document. But so that applies to the sale of land. But talking about marriage, then the Torah says ki yikach, which shows us that the husband is the active party. The Amar Rav Amar of Nachman, and Rav said the name of Nachman, Kasabal and the Yara Cheres, Afal Pishem Boshava Pruta, Bicham Kadashli, Bicham Marasli, Bicham into. If he writes on a piece of paper, you or your daughter are married to me or engaged to me, or are my wife. Whether it's to the woman herself or to her father when she's a minor on her behalf. Um, she becomes married, but only midato, only if it is with with consent, right? In other words, you can't just go marry somebody without her consent, right? Even if you write it in a document, it's meaningless unless she agrees. Vahu shalo bagra, but in the case of doing it through her father is only if she doesn't isn't completely, independent, right? So recall, I'm not sure if we've covered this already, but um, a girl is under the control of her father until she's 12. And then there's this period of 6 months until she's 12 and a half, where she's called Nara. And then from the time, so she's still, in some respects, she's still controlled by her father. And at the age of 12 and 6 months, then she becomes a bogeris, then she's a legal adult. And her father is no longer party to her transactions. Okay. Kasol aniyar alacheres afal pishem bo shava pruta harayat mukudesh asli harayat into harim asli. And if the husband writes on a worthless piece of paper, these formulas: you're married to me, or engaged to me, mukudeshes ben aladei via ben aladei atzma. She is married whether it's via her father or via herself, midata, but it has to be with her consent. V'hu shabagra, but that's only if she is old enough to do it herself. It's only if she's 12 years and 6 months. Okay, by Reb Shimon ben Lakish, so Rish Lakish asks, Star Erisin Shekosfu Shalolishma. What if, details now about this contract? What if it's written kind of, if you buy it in the Judaica store, right? It wasn't written for this particular woman. No, what about that? Does it have to be written for this particular woman, or can you carry it around in your pocket, and then when you find the right woman, you give it to her? So, Havayos liatzios makshin. What does the question depend on? Do we compare the creation of the marriage to the ending of the marriage? And say as follows: Ma yitzia bina lishma. Just as we know, a divorce has to be written for this particular woman. Afavaya bina lishma. So we would say the marriage has to be affected by the same thing. The contract, if you're doing it with a contract, the contract has to be written for this particular woman. Odilma, or maybe havios lahadali makshina. Maybe not so. Maybe the comparison we should make is between the different kinds of affecting the marriage. Ma havaya b'kesef lo bin lishma. Just as if you buy a ring, you don't have to buy a ring with a particular woman in mind. You can buy the ring now, and when you find the right woman, you give her the ring to marry her. So it doesn't have to be purchased for this particular person. Maybe we say the same thing about a contract. You can write the contract. When you find the right woman, you give it to her. Okay, so which is it? Basar Devaya Harapashta. He answered his own question. Yes, we do. We do link it to the get, just as the get has to be written for that particular woman. So a contract of marriage has to be written for that particular woman. How do I know? Diamakra Biatza Vahaisa. Because the Torah links these two. When it talks about divorce, it says kiyikach ish isha, etc. V'yatza b'haisel ishacher. He can divorce her, and she goes and marries somebody else. So v'yatza b'haisel, the divorce is mentioned in the same breath as the next marriage. So there is some comparison, some linking of divorce to marriage, and he is interpreting that as, just as the divorce has to be written for the particular woman, so too the marriage contract. Itmar. What if he writes it for her, for this particular woman, but she doesn't know about it when it's being written? Rav Ravina Amre Mekudeshes. Rav and Ravina say it's valid. Papa Rav Shuravia Amre and Mekudeshes. Papa Rav Shuravia says no. What's the argument? Rav Papa says, let me tell you, what everybody's thinking here. Ematamadi too. They're the opposite side was saying that it does work the reason is the because makish that we link the creation of the marriage to the ending of the marriage. And in that case, just as the husband can write a get for this woman without her knowledge, and it works. Same thing with marriage. But my reasoning is that the linking is as follows. Just as the get needs to be written with the consent of the giver of the get, the husband's consent. So, who's the counterpart in a marriage? The person um, who is affecting this is the woman, right? She's, as it were, she is giving herself to the husband, right? So, just as the giver in the case of the get has to consent to the document being written, so too the giver in the case of marriage, which is the woman, has to consent to the document being written. Okay, so let's try and resolve this question. May say, Ein kosfin shtari erusin v'nisuin el midas shein. Here's a brisa that says both husband and wife have to consent to the writing of the contract of marriage. My love shari erusin v'nisuin mamish. So take it literally, take it as it's written. The Gemara says no shari psikta. We're not talking about it. We're talking about what we now call the tanaim, right, where the families agree to the the dowry or whatever before the marriage. That's what we're talking about. That the dowry agreements are only effective if both parties are agreeing to them. But we're not talking about the actual marriage contract. And what is this? Kidarav Gita. This is, of course, with Rav Gidel Amarav, the Rav Gidel Amarav. When the families are discussing the marriage, the bride's father says to the husband's father, "How much are you throwing in, for a dowry? Kach l'kach, so and so. So levicha, and how much are you giving for your daughter? Kach l'kach, so such and such amount. Amdu v'kidshu kanim." And if they then go out, like if they have a verbal agreement and then they do the Kiddushin, then their verbal agreements are binding. These are things, classic examples of things that obligate you just verbally. Okay. So we don't have a lot of discussion about the shtar, about the marriage contract. We're actually done. And we're moving on to the third way of marrying a woman, which is through sex. Ubavia. The Mishnah said through sex. Minol. How do we, where do you get this idea from? Amar Ravo says, the Pasuk says, Bu'ulas Baal, referring to a married woman. It says a woman who is so I don't know how to translate this, but Baal literally means owner, but it's also used as the term for husband. And Be'ila is the act of sex. If a man has sex with a woman, he is called the Boel. All right. So when the Torah says V'hi isha bu'ulas Baal, she is a woman. Here it's translated woman who has cohabited with a husband. That's a good translation of any. By this phrase, we understand that you can become a husband through sex. Some say it was Reish Lakish who said this. Ku'ura zu shashana Rabbi. What you like what Rabbi taught? He has another source. Ki kach isha ubala. When a man marries a woman and sleeps with her. So Rabbi says that indicates that that sex is enough to affect marriage. So the answer is if only from that. No, there it says ki yikach when a man takes a woman ubala and then cohabits with her, then has sex with her. So that's why I need the second source. Kamash Malan, the first verse that we are Beulas Baal, one who is, which we interpreted as one who is married through the act of sex. Masti Rav asked him, Cain, if so, if that's true, um, that that second source could mean that he marries her first and then sleeps with her. So so how can you ever have the case in the Torah of a woman who's engaged and uh, someone rapes her, that he is liable to be stoned? So how could that ever happen? If he married her, if the husband married her with money and then slept with her, then she's not a virgin, right? Where the Torah's case is where she's a virgin. But if he married her with money but didn't sleep with her yet, lav klumu, then like if you're saying that the way to marry somebody is to give her something of value and then have sex with her, then if he hasn't completed the second part, then she's not married. So how could this ever happen, right? Um, and how could you have a woman who is married but hasn't yet had sex, right? If you think that you need both to affect the marriage. So Rabbi said before Abaye, what if the man married the husband gave her the ring, and then he slept with her, he had sex with her anally, right? Not vaginally. So she's still technically a virgin. And then if someone else comes along and she's married, she's married to her husband, but she's still a virgin because she hasn't had vaginal sex. So then if someone rapes her, that qualifies for the Torah's case that he's liable to stone. But Amrlo Abaye, so Abaye says, wait a minute, um, uh, the Rebbe and the rabbis were only arguing about the third party, right? Aval Baal, Divrei HaKolim, Baal Lesh, Lokadarka, Asa B'ula. Wait a minute, you're assuming that having anal sex is not considered sex with the husband, but it is. Everyone agrees that is that she's that if she's had anal sex, she's not considered a virgin anymore. So again, we're back to the case of if you think that you need to give a ring and have sex, then either she's a virgin or she's not a virgin. Either she's not married yet, or she's married and not a virgin. So what's the case where she's married and still a virgin? Mahi. So where do we get that from? The Tanya, we have a brisa. The brisa is talking about a woman, a naramarasa, a woman who is married but still a virgin. If 10 people rape her, right, or it doesn't have to be a rape, but yeah, if 10 people sleep with her, kulam biskila, all of them are liable. Rabbi, however, Rabbi says, Rani harishon biskila. No, only the first one is because when the first one sleeps with her, when the first one has sex with her, she's still a virgin until that happens. After that, everybody else, she's no longer a virgin anymore. So they don't get skila, they get chenek, which is the punishment for just a regular old adultery. Amar of Nachman. Amar of Nachman, by Yitzchak of Nachman says, Mashkachos la kagon shekitsha b'shtar. So you know how it can happen, how you can be married and still a virgin if you use a shtar, if you use a contract, right? We've been talking about ki yikachishi shobala, when a man acquires a woman, that implies kesef, right? That he's marrying her with something of value. But what if, and then so then that's what the Torah is talking about when it's, according to this formulation, when it says a man marries a woman and sleeps with her. But if it's a contract, we don't have that. Oh, Gomer Umozi. Just as a contract can all by itself release a woman from marriage, right? A get. So too, a contract all by itself without the requirement of sleeping with her can affect a marriage. So that's how you can have a marriage where the woman is still a virgin. They haven't slept together yet. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan. So now we have we still have these two possible sources for how we know that that sex affects marriage. So Rabbi Yochanan, Hayu Ba'ala Ma'avila. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan, what does he do with the other verse? Ki isha uba'ala. He uses that. Zu niknes b'via. The ein ama ivriya niknes b'via. That when it says ki isha uba'ala, that that uh, that when a man marries a woman and sleeps with her, so that applies. It's saying only to an isha, to a regular wife, but not a person who, not a woman who is a slave. Um, that person cannot be acquired through sex. Sakadata kamina, and I might have thought Tese b'kal b'chomer mihavama. I might have thought that you could derive this from the case of a yavama, of the brother, the levirate marriage. My yavama she'enik nisv'kesef. How do you marry your? How do you affect a levirate marriage when the husband dies with no children and there's a brother? So how does the brother marry her? There's no money involved, right? That in that case, the only thing you need to do, and the only way you can affect the yibum is through sex. Um, so a yavama that you can't, it doesn't work if you use money, if you use a ring or whatever, something of value. Niknes b'via, but sex still works. Zush niknes b'kasef, einodin niknes b'via. So a woman who's a slave, right? Um, she can be purchased with money, so certainly she should be able to be um, married through sex. So therefore, the Torah says uvala to tell us that no, that's not the case. You would have thought that logically, but it's not the case. So Gemara says, well, wait, I don't even like that possible kavachomer, that possible linkage, because Mali Vama Shekain Zakuka Vomedes. The reason you can say the reason that you don't need that money doesn't work is that there's an event that precipitated the linkage between these two people, between the brother and the sister-in-law, right? And that event is the death of the brother, right? So she's already kind of been designated, right? So that's why um, she's already, has a connection to him. So that's why you don't need the money. So okay, so the Gemara says, here's a different reason, a different idea why we would assume that you need to that sex alone is good enough um, for a slave. So I might have thought, oh, the cost of yikachlo, since since the Torah says if he takes imacheres yikachlo, we're talking about the obligations of marriage. If a man takes another wife, um, um, even talking in the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim about marrying a slave. If he takes someone else, another wife, he's still responsible to maintain the first one. Here, the Torah kind of provides a link between this wife, the slave, and the next wife, the other wife. Just as the another wife, a regular, ordinary person, ordinary woman, can be married through sex alone. So I would think same would apply to the slave. So it tells us with that pasuk that isha uva'ala, that uva'ala only applies to the double requirement only applies to a regular woman and not a slave. The slave herself, she can be married through. Sorry, the non-slave is the only one that can be acquired or married through sex alone, and not um, through the other devices of value or shtar. For Rabbi, what about Rabbi? That Rabbi said that that's the source for Kiddushin, for marriage through sex. Hi Svarmin Allah. Where do you get the idea that it doesn't apply to an Amma, to a slave? In Cain's, because if so, lichtav rachmana uval, my uval. So it's the extra hey. You could have said if a man marries a woman and has sex, but by adding the extra hey uval and has sex with her, that implies only her, only a regular woman, um, and not a slave. Shmami tarte. So both of them can be included. Ularava. Ularava Diamar Barahina Asbrali. And according to Rava, who says Barahina explained this to me, Ki kachi ishovala, when a man takes a woman and has sex with her, Kiddushin hamasurin levia hava Kiddushin. The kind of Kiddushin where there's a possibility of having sex, legally having sex with her, that is Kiddushin. Kiddushin she'emisrin levia hava Kiddushin. But if that's not possible, it's not even a marriage. So, for example, if you have someone who is related to you, right, that you're not allowed to sleep with her, then you can't. Then the marrying her is not effective.
11, 14. 17.
So, Michael, 1 second. So Michael, so according to Rava, who uses this pasuk for that, like what about the other two things that Rav derived that we just saw? So in Cain, Rava would say, if that were so, if that's all wanted to tell us, nichtav kra o ba'ala, right? When a man marries a woman or sleeps with her or has sex with her, right? My ubala and sleeps with her, so that allows for that specifies that there has to be both kiddushin and the possibility for sex for sex later on in this marriage. If that's not the case, so then that's how he can say that all of these three details are included in the phrase ki kachi shisha ubala. Okay, Rabbi. Hi, bu'ulas ba'al ma'avdilai. Now, so Rabbi uses the verse ki kachi shisha ubala, but what about the other opinion that we can derive isha bu'ulas ba'al, a woman who cohabited with her husband as the source? What does he do with that? What it's teaching us, what that pasuk is teaching us, is it's only the husband who, through any kind of sex, any kind of penetration, makes her that is considered that takes her out of the category of a virgin. So a husband having anal sex with his wife, that makes her no longer a virgin, but somebody else comes along, as in the case of adultery that we saw before. Anal sex does not remove her from the category of being a virgin. Does Rabbi really hold that? Tanya, we have a brisa. Kulam beskila. We saw before this brisa that if 10 people committed adultery with her and she's still a virgin, then they all get skila. Oh, how could she still be a virgin? Rabbi says, Rabbi says, no. How can she still be a virgin? The first one gets skila for the nara marasa, for having sex with a married virgin, and the rest of them they committed adultery, but there's no virginity here, so they get put to death. Rav Zera, Moda Rebbe, no, Rebbe says that they all have to pay the amount of the fine that applies to adultery with a virgin. It's just that the type of death, type of death sentence that they're condemned with is different. So in other words, there's still an aspect of this case in which she is um, if she is considered a virgin. Maishna Miktola. Why would you make a difference? Maishna Miktola. What's the difference? Like, why would you distinguish it in terms of the monetary fine versus the capital liability? Shani Hassan, because about the death penalty, Amar Kra, the Torah says, you may say levado, that in the case where she protest, where she resists, and she's been raped, then only the man who slept with her, who had sex with her, he's the only one liable to the death penalty. So the word levado, only him, is extra. So Rabbi uses that word to say that the case of the 10 men who have anal sex with this Nara Marasa, it's only the first guy. It's only the first guy who gets the death penalty of skila, but all of them are really liable for having sex with a married virgin. Okay. Rabbanan, what about the rabbis? Hi levado my. So if you disagree with that, then what's this word levado? Him alone. That is for the following brisa. Both of them shall die. Both the woman and the adulterer. Only if they're both the same. In other words, they're both of the right age. No, there's a case where you can put where if the woman is still a minor and can't be put to death for this, and the man is age of majority, he can be put to death by himself. They don't have to be equivalent. Okay. I'm going to go on a little further. I told David we get up to the colon in the middle of the page. So for Yochanan, where do you get this? So according to Rabbi Yochanan, how do you know this? That even if they're of different age liabilities, age categories. No, wait a second. No, Rabbi Yochanan, who said that B'ulas Baal teaches you that's where you get the idea that you can marry someone by having sex with her. Where do you get this idea from that only the husband takes her out of the category of a virgin through anal sex? So how do you get that idea? So Rabbi Yochanan would say, Cain, if it were so, Nichtov Kra Bulas Ish. Like, why does it say Bulas Baal? Right? She's a woman who has slept with someone, right? My Bulas Baal, but it says specifically she had sex with the husband, cohabited with the husband. So that Shwami Natarte. So both can be, you can get both of these from that one. From that one verse. Okay, so we will stop here, and David will pick it up here tomorrow.
Yashar Koach. Thank you.
Have a good day,
Yashar,
everybody.
thank you.